Hey everybody, welcome to part 11 of our cloud series. We're going to dive into a string of demos. Our previous part 10, I gave you a demonstration here of the Azure console. Now we're going to go ahead and build a resource. But guys, if you haven't seen the previous parts, or if you didn't know they existed, one easy way to be notified of all the new parts I'm adding to this series and then future series that I'm doing, like for instance Security Plus, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way you'll know when a new piece is added. I'm going to do a bunch of demos over the coming 4, 5, 6 parts within Azure. And then eventually we're going to do some demos in Amazon Web Services as well. So if you want to see those and you want to know when they're released, please subscribe. Also, guys, as normal, please like the video, share the video. If you have any questions on any of this, use the comments section. Hey guys, I don't put advertising on my videos. I don't do this for money, as I've said previously. I do this simply to spread my training as far and as wide as I can get it. So I want to thank you guys for taking a couple minutes, about 20 minutes I would suggest, out of your day today to watch this little Azure demo I'm going to do with you now. So we're in the Azure console again, as you can see, but what I want to focus on in this part is to actually create a resource. Again, check out part 11 where I demoed all the different pieces and so forth of the console. But if you notice right in the middle right now under resources, I don't have any resources at all. Right? The only thing I have as a resource is my subscription. So this is a completely empty, if you will, Azure infrastructure that I'm going to now start to build. I'm going to simply go up top under Azure Services up here, and I'm going to say I want to create a resource. And as I showed you in our demo yesterday, there are a lot of resources in here, but these are the most popular marketplace kind of resources. Well, let's say I'm not seeing exactly what I want in here, right? I can go up and, as it says, search services and the marketplace. So I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to type, I don't know, Windows Server, and I'm going to hit enter. And you're going to see that a bunch of stuff is going to pop up here. And notice all of these different scenarios with Windows Server in it. Do I just want to build a straight Windows Server with nothing in it? I can certainly do that. Do I want a Windows Server 2022 install, known as the data center variant? Do I want a core install with no GUI? Right? Core is all command line driven, so it saves you a lot of processing, gives you more of an efficient machine because the GUI's gone. Do I want a SQL Server 2019 on a Windows Server 2022 system? Right? Whatever it is you want, you can go ahead and build it. Well, I'm just going to choose over here under Windows Server. We'll go ahead and click that, and it brings you to the Windows Server portion of the marketplace, basically. And notice under plan, right here where my mouse is, under plan, it says Windows Server 2022 Data Center, and it goes on to say Azure Edition. Well, I don't want that, maybe. So there's a drop-down list, and notice I can choose all of these Windows Server variants. And this is all going to be built from templates. Right? A profile, which is nothing more than a template which is going to build this virtual machine exactly the way I want it. I don't know. I'm going to go in here and take a small disk variant right here. Let's find small disk server 2019 data center right here. Small disk. I don't need a big disk. I'm going to take a small disk, as it says now, Windows Server 2019 data center, and I can choose create. Or I could choose start with a preset configuration. By clicking that, now notice I can choose a dev test environment, a production system. Do I want it to be general purpose, which is called a D series VM? Now, when it talks about these different series, they're optimized for the workload. So a D series, if you look at it, there's a DS2 and a DS3. 2 CPUs versus 4 CPUs, and more RAM, like memory optimized E series or compute optimized F series. So depending on your workload, it would gear you to the appropriate size, if you will, of the VM. If you have a real labor intensive workload that you're going to be managing or whatever, you might choose something totally different. Now I'm just going to click create. Okay, I'm going to choose create. And now what's going to happen is a wizard's going to open up. And you're going to have to work yourself through this wizard to build the virtual machine the way you want it. Now, remember I mentioned in part 11, and again, if you haven't seen, part 10, if you haven't seen part 10, please go back and watch part 10. I talked about the subscription as being like your account at the electric company or the water company, right? You call the electric company, you set up your account. Now your electric is transferred into your name. As you start using kilowatt hours, you're being billed. Well, your subscription is the same thing within Azure. Your subscription is your financial link to your cloud products, whatever you're building. So I only have one subscription that I'm using for these demos, Tim Main subscription. And then it asks you for a resource group. Now, if you had resource groups already created, you would choose it. I don't have one, so I'm going to choose create new. Now, what is a resource group? A resource group is a way of collecting all of the resources, your disks, your network, your operating system, the VM, all these things we're going to build into a manageable group. Okay, and I can view billing based on the group. I can search for resources within resource groups. It's about organization. If you have any knowledge of, say, Windows Server and Active Directory, we have OUs, like organizational units in Active Directory. This is kind of similar to that, although there's a cost factor associated with it, meaning I can view my bills and my dollars spent associated with a resource group. I don't do that with organizational units. I do other things with those, like assign group policies. But the point is, this is a way for me to organize my resources. So I'm going to go ahead and create one. We'll call it the YouTube group here. Now, I did something on purpose here. I want to show you how it's going to error out if you make a mistake. I have a space in there in between YouTube and group. Resource group names can only include, as it says, alphanumeric underscore parentheses hyphen period, except at the end. You can't have a period at the end, and Unicode characters that match the allowed characters. So my problem is I have a space in between the two of those. So if I go ahead and put a hyphen, now I'm good to go. So the nice thing about the console, if you make a mistake, you're going to know you made a mistake, so you can go back and correct that. All right, so I'm calling it the YouTube resource group. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click OK there. Now I'm going to give this virtual machine a name. Let's call it the YouTube server. Okay, now we have a problem again, don't we? Because I used an underscore. You cannot use underscores in names. You can use underscores in the resource group names, but you cannot use underscores in computer names. Now, what is the virtual machine name, by the way? And also, let me say this. If you don't really know what you're doing on an individual line here, look at the circle I's. The circle I next to every one of the titles of the line you're on. And if you mouse over it, you'll get a flyout, and it'll tell you exactly what's going on within that particular line. Virtual machines in Azure have two distinct names. The virtual machine name, used as the Azure Resource Identifier, I'll explain in a minute, and in guest host name. So what does that mean? Well, it's used two places. When I log on to Azure and I see a list of all of my virtual machines, that's the name I'm going to see. The computer name actually of that virtual machine is also the same name. So YouTube server is the host name, and YouTube server is the resource identifier name within Azure. I'm going to leave it YouTube server. We're going to choose a region. We're going to have a whole discussion as part of this cloud series on regions and zones and global resources and all these things. But for where we are now, we're basically saying where we want this virtual system to be located. Now, I'm not choosing a specific data center in a specific city, in a specific state, in a specific country. I am choosing a geographical region, and there's a drop-down list, and you'll see all these different regions. If I want to put this in Norway or Poland or Switzerland or Qatar or Brazil or South Africa, Northern Europe, Australia, I can do that. The rule of thumb here with any good networking, I might add, and by the way, I'm going to leave this on Eastern US. The rule of networking is a very simple one. One of them, bring the resource as close to the users as possible. Well, I'm down here on the East Coast in Florida, United States. I'm going to have my resource on the East Coast. Okay, again, I don't know what data center it's in. I don't know what physical server this virtual machine is going to be running on. All I know is geographically where it's going to be. And by the way, I can even choose to send my resource, to build my resource in multiple zones within a region. The Eastern US, that's a big region. I might want to have more than one of these virtual machines spread out within the region, so that if we have a failure of a data center somewhere, I'm still going to have another, if you will, mirrored copy of my VM somewhere else, and it remains online. And that's exactly what we're doing in this next section. It says East US, then it says availability options, and you've got some availability options here. If I choose availability zone, notice it says availability zone, zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. Let's say I put my virtual machine, my YouTube server, in 3 different zones. Well, guys, take a look at the virtual machine names, what happened up here. Do you see that? It says YouTube server 1, YouTube server 2, YouTube server 3. Wait a minute, I'm only creating one VM. What's going on? Well, if you're going to build availability and fault tolerance, and you're going to put this information, you're going to put this VM in multiple locations, you're going to need to have more than one, and this is going to build you 3 redundant copies of the VMs. And then, of course, you can load balance between them as well. Now, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to simply say, and go back to the drop-down list under availability options right here. I'm going to choose no redundancy. I'm only building a simple VM. In practice, I wouldn't do this. In practice, I would have availability and redundancy. But remember, you're now paying for more than one virtual machine if you do that. But I'm going to leave it like that. We're going to keep the default. AMD 64 is grayed out. We can't choose that with an Intel product. So we're going to use just the 64-bit option. And by the way, it tells you right there, AMD is not supported, rather AMD 64. Next, we have size, standard DS1 V2. This is giving you one virtual CPU. One CPU, 3.5 gigs of memory. It's going to cost you roughly $92.98 a month. Okay? It's going to cost you $91 a month for this computer. Now, as you start using that computer and the workload increases, you'll pay more for it, but that's the base charge for it. It's then asking, and again, I just want to reiterate, if you look at some of these lines and you're not really sure what they mean, just do your mouse over the circle I and it will tell you. Now I'm creating the administrative account so I can log on to it. Okay? Tim Euler, my name is going to be the username, and I'll do my password. And yes, guys, if you mess the password up, it'll tell you. Okay, there you go. It just verified the password. I have my 3 checks. I'm good to go there. Now, the next section is how do you want to connect to this VM to initially manage it? In essence, I'm creating a firewall rule. I could say no public inbound ports, and what did I do? I just locked down this VM and the ultimate security, right? So that means you could only connect to it from within your organization, within the cloud. Okay, which may be exactly what you want if you're just using this as an infrastructure for a business. Now, I'm going to connect to it. I want to connect to it over the internet. I'm going to leave it allow selected ports. And by the way, you have a drop down list of 4 ports here. You can choose HTTP, HTTPS, SSH, or RDP. Now, are these the only ports you'll ever be allowed to open on a virtual machine? That would be a real big problem. What if I want an FTP server in the cloud, port 20 and 21 TCP? Well, I would have to create a network security group, an NSG. A network security group is basically a collection of inbound and outbound rules that we link either to a network card or to a subnet. So if I wanted to truly have port 20 and 21 inbound from the internet open and outbound from the cloud to the internet open, I would have to do something else. For right now, I'm just going to leave it RDP. That's what I'm going to allow because we're going to connect to it using RDP. And I'm going to go ahead and use an existing Windows Server license. You got to tell it how you're going to license it, right? That's how I'm going to do it. And then I have to confirm it. Are you sure you have a Windows Server license? Well, yeah, I do. So I'm going to confirm that. And next, I'm going to go to disks. Now look, it says deployment recommendations. They give you recommendations while you're doing things. Azure detected there are other region size and zone recommendations that may lead to a higher chance of successful deployment. To deploy seamlessly, please adopt any of the suggested recommendations. I did this on purpose, meaning the way I configured it, so you can see that Microsoft's product really will work with you to try to get you to build the best environment you can. So if you go to view recommendations here, what will it have you do? Changing basic options may reset selection. So it's warning you a little bit, right? It's warning you a little bit. Azure detected their other region size and zone recommendations. And then over here, look what happened. Over here, Azure detected, again, there are other region size and zone recommendations that may lead to a higher chance of successful deployment. To deploy seamlessly, please adopt any of the suggested recommendations, whichever you want. And you can say adopt or don't adopt. That's entirely up to you how you want to do that. Okay, but I'm just going to go ahead and we'll adopt them. Now we're going to go to dis and notice I didn't get a recommendation here anymore because I took it. Now here's the thing. You're always going to get an operating system disk, number 1. That would be like your C drive. You're always going to get a D drive. The D drive is a temporary drive, so never store anything on it. That's where like your paging file is, your crash dump file, all of that stuff is. So you're going to get those 2 things. Just remember, never save anything to your D drive because when you reboot the VM, poof, it's gone. Not your C drive, obviously. That is persistent. And then you would create a data drive. And that is the best practice scenario. Keep data on a data drive separately. Don't keep it on your C drive because the C drive may become corrupt. Now you lost all of your data, right? So keep it separate. The other cool thing you can do is you might already have an image of a disk already with data on it. And I'm just going to import that right into my VM and it's done. The data's already there. So especially if you have like redundant file servers that are load balanced, man, that's awesome. I've got a file server disk. I import it right in and I'm done and it's up and running. Okay, but we're going to work ourselves through this. Notice it says OS disk type, premium, solid state. You have 2 different choices for architecture. You have hard disk drives, you have solid state drives, and there's 2 flavors of solid state. Premium gives you better IOPS, better performance for sensitive workloads. And standard would be good for like a web server or some dev or test environment. And then standard HDD, great for, hard disk drives, great for backups, infrequent use of data, those kind of things, just a regular workload. I'm just going to leave the defaults, premium solid state. I want this to be deleted with the virtual machine. So if I ever get rid of this virtual machine, I want the disk and everything to go with it. Notice I'm not choosing to create that other D drive. That's going to happen automatically, just like when you install from a product DVD. You end up with a small partition and your C drive, right? That's going to happen automatically. But again, just remember that D drive is a volatile drive. Everything goes. Now, I'm also going to create a data disk. Notice right here it says create down on the bottom left. Create and attach a new disk or attach an existing disk. The existing disk is the one that I mentioned that you can populate your file server with all of your files and folders immediately if you wanted to do that. I'm going to say create and attach a new disk. And I'm just going to accept all the defaults. By the way, it's 1024 gigs. That's a terabyte where I come from, and you can go up higher than that if you want to. I want to say you can have a total of something like 30 terabytes for a basic subscription. And I want to delete this one as well when I delete the VM, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK here, right? And it will slowly build that disk for us. It's a little bit slow out there, but there you go. And by the way, notice it says right here, source type, none, empty disk. That's all I want it is to be a basic disk here with nothing in it. So give it a few seconds here. It is really running slowly. Eventually it will kick in. Guys, it's been about 21 minutes here. I'm thinking what I'm going to do is stop this and set up a new video, getting into part 2, if you will, of part 11, just because I want to keep the time of these videos down. That's what we're going to go ahead and do. Hey guys, don't forget, like the video, share the video, subscribe, and then guys, by the way, come back to watch the second part of this, which I'm going to put up on the same day that this one's going up, so you can watch them back to back to back. All right, guys, I'll see you in a little bit.